Her daughter-in-law sealed her bedroom door with duct tape, then called it a joke. Elaine Mercer, widow and former reference librarian, didn't argue. Chad and Kelsey, her grown son and his girlfriend, laughed from the basement like she wasn't even there. By the time they'd finished their game night, the property had a new listing agent. Elaine had spent decades building this house now. She was preparing its clean break. And when they returned from Reno, eviction notices would greet them at the door. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Elaine Mercer reached for the doorknob in the half-light of her bedroom. It didn't turn. She frowned. Something tugged back a resistance that didn't belong. She tried again, firmer this time. The door groaned but refused to open. She paused, listening. Laughter floated up through the air vent. It was muffled but unmistakable. Chad's loud guffaw, Kelsey's snorting giggle, and some unfamiliar male voice yelling, "Don't let the ghost out!" More laughter erupted. Something clattered against what sounded like a card table. Dice? Chips? Probably one of those endless tournaments they held downstairs like they were 20 again. Elaine pressed her palm flat against the door and leaned close. That's when she saw it. Gray strips of duct tape. 4 thick ones stretched horizontal across the frame, sealing the edges tight. One near the handle, one just above the latch, another at knee height, one across the top. Her hand stayed there longer than it needed to. Cool. Still. Then she stepped back. No anger. Not yet. She retrieved her small letter opener from the nightstand drawer. The one with the oak handle her husband bought her on their trip to Asheville in '92. She slid it under the corner of the tape and began to peel slowly, methodically, so it wouldn't tear the paint. She didn't make it halfway before voices passed the bottom of the stairs. "She's probably asleep," Kelsey whispered, then louder. "We thought she'd be better as background." A flush crept up Elaine's neck, not from shame but heat, the kind that starts deep in the chest and rises without permission. She pressed her lips together until they whitened. Then she took a step back, carefully set the peeled tape on her dresser like evidence, and walked to the corner of the room. She picked up her phone, took 4 photos, the tape across the door, the warped reflection in the brass knob, a close-up of the brand name, one wide shot with her slippers in frame for scale. Click, 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 click. The laughter downstairs thinned into ambient noise. Plates scraped. Ice clinked. Someone cheered. Then, nothing but the hum of the fridge and a faint echo of a game timer. Elaine sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't touch her tea, didn't cry, just listened to the sounds of her own breathing. A soft slide, like paper on wood, pulled her gaze to the crack beneath the door. A folded note. She rose and picked it up, loopy handwriting in purple ink, uneven from haste. "Sorry, I didn't know. Sadie." Elaine's fingers lingered on the paper. She could picture her granddaughter crouching outside the door, heart racing, trying not to be seen. That alone nearly undid her. She sat back down, slowly opened the top drawer of the antique writing desk in the corner. Inside, a yellow legal pad, a pen, a slim leather folder marked Property, Mercer, Elaine, 2020 title transfer. She ran her thumb over the notary stamp on the first page. Her name, sole owner. The corners of her mouth lifted just barely. No satisfaction, no malice, just clarity. Outside her window, the wind picked up. The neighbor's American flag flapped in lazy waves. Lights went off, one by one down the block. But inside the Mercer home, the basement still throbbed with voices, music, and shrill victory whoops. Elaine got up, double-checked her lock, and sat cross-legged on the floor. She opened her notebook to a clean page. At the top, she wrote, "Inventory, structural damages plus behavioral incidents, week 1. Below it, she numbered a list. 1. Duct tape on bedroom door, 4 strips, Gorilla brand. She kept writing. Downstairs, Kelsey shrieked with laughter again. "I win! You all suck at this game." Elaine didn't flinch. She simply turned the page. The cafe was halfway between a dog park and a DMV neither cozy nor chaotic. Perfectly forgettable, which was exactly what Elaine wanted. She stirred her tea with the tip of her spoon, watching the steam curl like rising thread. Across from her sat Mr. Langford, in a charcoal gray sweater, and a face like weathered stone. He didn't speak right away, just opened a leather folder with a soft rustle and slid a document toward her. Elaine glanced down. Her name? Again Elaine, Margaret Mercer, centered at the top of the page in embossed serif. Finalized post-estate, he said. Filed clean. No liens, no co-owners. She didn't react at first, just reached for her glasses and read the language, like she used to read reference tags in the library. Eyes quick, hand steady, emotion held at bay. Langford let the silence sit. He understood her pace by now. And I could sell, she said eventually, voice low, without notifying them. You could, he replied. It's your primary residence. Colorado is clear on that. You're not obligated to extend tenancy, not even to family, unless there's a lease, which there isn't. He folded his hands. If you wanted to. Exit quietly, the title allows for it. Elaine nodded once, as if noting a book overdue. Outside, a dog barked. A toddler knocked over a chair. The world, as always, continued. By the time Elaine returned home, Chad's latest championship was in full swing. The basement pulsed with music-aggressive pop with artificial bass. Someone shouted through a megaphone, "Draw 4, baby!" She slipped past the noise like fog, silent and frictionless, and climbed the stairs to her room. The house shuddered once, as someone stomped the floor below. She sat at her desk, opened her folder, and began a new list. Exhibit A, Noise Log, Disruption Events, the 10th of January. Game night ran until 2:13 a.m. The 11th of January. Duct tape on bedroom door. The 12th of January. Ghost comment. Isolation incident. The 13th of January. TikTok dance filming outside guest room. She added timestamps, decibel estimates, links to HOA regulations, then opened her phone. A new post from Kelsey had gone up an hour ago. Multi-generational homes are exhausting. I miss silence, boundaries, and my own kitchen. Anyone else feel this? Elaine tapped the screenshot shortcut. Click. Saved. She zoomed in, noting the comments. Callie Cat. Lol girl, same. The Sims 4 Eva. Ugh, are you okay? Kelsey. Mercer. Just venting. Elaine placed her phone face down and stared at the ceiling. The chandelier in the hallway swayed ever so slightly from the thudding below. Plaster dust trembled on the crown molding. She opened her notebook again, wrote one word in the margin. Fracture. Later that night, Sadie slipped into her room without knocking. She always did Thathoff apology, half instinct. The girl stood at the edge of the rug, wrapped in a fleece hoodie with her hair braided to one side. I saw you at that cafe near Cherry Creek, she said, softly. With that man. Elaine raised an eyebrow. I wasn't spying, Sadie added quickly. I was across the street with Dad, picking up dry cleaning. He didn't see. Elaine folded the corner of her page and closed the notebook. That man is a real estate attorney. Sadie blinked, digesting. Are you selling the house? I'm considering options, Elaine replied evenly. Sadie's shoulders tensed, then fell. I miss when this place was quiet. Like, not dead quiet, just not like a theme park. Elaine stood. She reached over and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind Sadie's ear. You have excellent instincts, she said. Keep using them. Sadie offered a tired smile and left without pressing. Elaine waited until the house emptied itself. Chad and Kelsey had packed their overnight bags in a loud frenzy of forgotten chargers, mismatched shoes, and snack arguments. Sadie had quietly slipped into the passenger seat of the Subaru with a book in her lap. Chad shouted something to Kelsey about finishing in the top 100 this time, and then the engine sputtered twice before backing out of the driveway. The silence afterward was almost too clean, artificial, like someone had vacuumed the noise out of the air. Elaine stood at the upstairs window, watching until the car disappeared around the corner. Then she moved. First, photos. She worked quickly, precisely. Hallways first. Then the kitchen she wiped down the counter, replaced the paper towel roll, and nudged a vase of fresh carnations into the frame. Living room next. She tugged the throw blanket tighter around the couch, adjusted the lighting with the sheer curtains, and stepped back. Click, click. She opened the fridge just enough to reveal the absurdity. 5 shelves of energy drinks, condiments, and Kelsey's labeled smoothie containers. Click. Then down to the basement. It reeked faintly of sweat, plastic dice, and takeout. The clutter had metastasized boxes of half-open board games, beanbags with deep body dents, a dry erase scoreboard covered in nonsense. Elaine stood at the threshold, one foot on the bottom step, and took 3 photos, one with flash, one without. One close-up of a Red Bull balanced on the corner of a Monopoly board. She turned on her heel and went back upstairs. By noon, Marla had arrived, a scarf around her head and a canvas tote swinging from her wrist like a pendulum of purpose. "You ready to stage a low-key revolution?" she asked. Elaine nodded. "Just light rearranging. Light is relative." Together, they transformed the living room and patio into something other than a dorm lounge. Marla swapped out the Pratters, novelty mugs for classic stoneware. Elaine placed a copy of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn on the coffee table with a handwritten sticky note. "My late husband's favorite." They cleared the back patio of tangled lights and board game crates. Marla strung up soft bulbs, wiped down the outdoor table, and added a bowl of lemons for color. At 3:12 p.m., Elaine sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and clicked Submit on the property listing. The address was listed under Sandstone Pines Trust. No mention of Elaine Mercer. No owner photo. Just a beautifully ambiguous line. Quiet, structurally sound home with recent updates and flexible closing timeline. That evening, Chad leaned against the fridge, sipping a protein shake. "Hey, just a heads up, we're doing the big overnight tournament next weekend. Couple guys are flying in from Reno." Elaine turned from the sink, drying her hands. "Sounds fun." He smiled, relieved, and left the kitchen to go shout across the house to Kelsey. Elaine wiped the counter one last time, then opened her planner. 3 red marks were already penciled in. Friday, 10 a.m. Saturday, 1:30 p.m. Sunday, 4 p.m. 3 showings, 3 agents confirmed, 3 windows to let the house speak for itself. That night, she lay in bed listening to the sound of dice clattering downstairs as Chad did a practice roll. Kelsey shrieked with laughter at some TikTok audio, but it didn't cut this Timonah through the growing sense of space between her and them. She pulled the blanket tighter and reached over to the dresser drawer. Inside was the Olympus tape recorder. She clicked it on, let it run for 5 minutes, then stopped and labeled it. Tape 3, Basement, Pre-Sale Atmosphere. She placed it beside the others. The doorbell rang exactly at 10. Elaine wiped her hands on a dish towel and stepped into the front hallway, where the morning sun cast long, quiet shadows across the floor. Through the frosted glass, she glimpsed a silhouette heels, a leather binder, a polite posture. She opened the door to a woman in her mid-30s, professionally dressed, her client just behind her. A couple in their late 40s with hopeful eyes and well-worn denim jackets. "Good morning," Elaine said. "I'm Elaine. Come on in." The scent of rosemary and yeast drifted from the kitchen, where a loaf of bread cooled beside 2 mismatched teacups. Elaine guided them inside, not over-explaining anything, letting the space speak. "This is the living room," she said, as they stepped into the rearranged space. The soft music playing from the old radio on the bookshelf was classical, quiet, unintrusive. "We tried to keep it true to the original bones of the house. Mid-60s, split level, structurally untouched." The woman buyer traced a finger along the windowsill. "It feels lived in, but not worn." Elaine nodded once and offered them slices of still warm bread. "My husband baked every weekend. I still try to honor that." The tour moved upstairs, through the spare bedrooms, the guest bath, and finally back to the kitchen. They complimented the natural light, the wide counters, the simple finishes. Elaine offered no emotional appeal, only facts, quiet confidence, and warmth where it mattered. And then, the basement. The moment they reached the foot of the stairs, everything changed. Board games were still stacked haphazardly along the walls. A whiteboard with offensive team names hung crooked. There were 2 open bags of Cool Ranch Doritos on the coffee table. An empty can of Monster sat directly beneath a framed photo of Elaine and her late husband in Yosemite. One of the buyers laughed softly. "You'd think kids lived here." Elaine didn't blink. "They do." The woman agent cleared her throat and nudged the couple toward the sliding door at the far end. "Basement's insulated. Could be converted into a second living space. Or a music room," the man added. "I play cello." Elaine turned slightly. You'll want to hear what it sounds like after midnight, especially if you value silence. The agent raised an eyebrow but said nothing. That afternoon, Marla arrived during the second showing. She wore a sun hat, sunglasses, and a messenger bag slung across her body like she was preparing for war. In the kitchen, she handed Elaine a thin file folder without speaking. Inside, 8 signed letters from neighbors Mr. Carrington, the Millers, the Gutierrez Twinsall, citing noise disruptions from excessive gatherings and unauthorized late-night gaming events. Elaine tucked it into the drawer beside the stove. Showings 2 and 3 followed the same rhythm. Tea, bread, a steady hand guiding people through the chaos that was never hers. Chad returned Sunday night with the kind of energy only caffeine and small victories could produce. His duffel bag hit the floor with a wet thud. "Guess who placed 63rd out of 400? He called through the house. Elaine was in the kitchen, placing the last of the clean teacups back into the cabinet. She didn't answer. He rounded the corner and opened the fridge. "Did you move my smoothie containers?" Elaine turned. "I shifted them to the bottom shelf. Just ask next time," he muttered, closing the door harder than necessary. And then he saw it. A glossy business card pinned to the fridge, with a magnet shaped like a crossword puzzle square. Sandstone Pines Realty. Private Client Services. Discretion is our specialty. Chad plucked the card off the fridge and turned it over in his fingers. "What is this?" Elaine looked up, calm as ever. "Oh, I must have forgotten to toss that." He stared at her, something new settling behind his eyes. A pause that hung in the air like a knife waiting to be thrown. "You having strangers in here while we're gone?" Elaine didn't answer right away, just dried her hands and folded the towel. "You know what they say," she replied finally, voice cool. "Silence makes a house feel bigger." The cafe wasn't busy that morning. Elaine preferred it that way, just the low murmur of espresso hissing and quiet indie music with lyrics no one could hear. She sat at the same corner table, back to the wall, folder open like it was any other errand. Mr. Langford wore his usual charcoal sweater, his silver watch glinting as he slid the contract across the table. "All cash buyer. Inspection waived. No contingencies. We close in 6. Elaine adjusted her glasses and read the top line again. Then she pointed to the last page. "There's a clause I'd like added." Langford glanced at her, then retrieved a pen. "Let me guess." She spoke plainly. "All non-owners must vacate within 10 business days of closing. No extensions, no exceptions." He nodded once. "Enforceable. I'll add it." Quietly. Elaine didn't smile. She just folded the page, like a librarian folding overdue notices, pressed her thumbprint over the notary seal, and handed it back. "You're sure about this?" Langford asked. She looked at him without blinking. "I wasn't duct taped in my own home to play chess with time." He said nothing more. Back at the house, Sunday night descended with its usual volume. Kelsey's voice echoed from the basement, now hosting what she called pre-Reno brainstorms. There were Pinterest printouts spread across the carpet and a Bluetooth speaker thumping mid-2000s hits. Sadie sat curled up on the second-floor landing, reading The Outsiders. Earbuds in, but one slightly out. That's when she heard it. Kelsey's voice, rising through the floor grate. "And then I thought, karaoke machine here, like in that open corner. Could be fun. I mean, who doesn't love ABBA?" Chad snorted. "The neighbors, probably." Kelsey. "Please, once we finish the soundproofing, they won't hear Jack." Sadie looked up, then back down at the page, but the sentence blurred. A slow, heavy exhale left her lungs. Elaine stood in the kitchen, sorting envelopes by color-white bills, yellow coupons, blue junk. When Kelsey popped up from the basement, her voice was bright and sugar-coated. "We might finally redo that gross carpet down there. And maybe, just maybe, I'll test out a karaoke app tonight." Elaine placed the last envelope into the shred pile. "Might be your last chance to plug it in." Kelsey paused. "What does that mean?" Elaine looked up, tone neutral. "Nothing." She turned back to the mail. "Just sounded like a goodbye." Kelsey laughed, like a wine glass cracking at the base. "You're bluffing. I've lived here rent-free for 18 months. You'd have kicked us out already if you had the guts." Elaine didn't respond. But from the hallway, Marla, who'd just arrived with a box of banana bread, leaned against the doorframe and said flatly, "She doesn't need guts. She's got paperwork." Kelsey scoffed and rolled her eyes before disappearing down the basement stairs. Elaine turned to Marla. They're going to panic. They should. Marla stepped closer and set the bread on the counter. Don't flinch, Elaine. They deserve the echo. The next day, Mr. Langford emailed the final signed documents at 8:02 a.m. Elaine printed each page and placed them in a folder labeled Sandstone Pines, closed. The deed was done. A lockbox with a key now sat tucked beneath the patio brick planter. Showings were over. Silence was on the calendar. It arrived by courier just after lunch. A white envelope, thick stock, hand-delivered. Chad opened the door in pajama pants and a Star Wars hoodie. Confused at first until he saw the crisp suit and the embossed folder. Chadwick Mercer? The courier asked. Chad blinked. Yeah? Official notice of occupancy termination. Dated and certified. He shoved the envelope into Chad's chest and walked back to the sedan without waiting for a reply. Elaine was in the sunroom, pruning the leaves of her aloe plant, when she heard the front door slam. Footsteps, fast and chaotic. Then the sound of crinkling paper being torn open. What the hell is this? Chad stood in the middle of the hallway, letter in one hand, disbelief in the other. His face was flushed, all color gone except for 2 red patches under each eye. Elaine didn't even flinch. She laid the shears down and turned slowly. It's what it says it is. Kelsey appeared behind him, already reading the second copy. 10 days? Are you serious? Elaine walked past them toward the kitchen. Her steps measured, unhurried. Very. You didn't even give us a warning, Chad's voice cracked. We live here. You squat here, Elaine corrected. Different verbs, different rights. Kelsey raised her voice now, shrill and cloying. We're your family, Elaine. You think this is loyalty? Elaine turned, fully facing them now. You duct-taped me into a bedroom and called me background noise. Now you're out of frame. The silence that followed felt colder than anything she'd heard from the basement. Sadie was sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor, folding her shirts into neat rows. She heard every word, but she didn't move until the house quieted again. She knocked softly on Elaine's door, even though she never had to. Come in, Elaine said. Sadie stepped inside holding a half-zipped duffel bag. Do I stay with you now? Elaine looked up from her ledger. If you want. Sadie nodded, eyes damp but not crying. I'd rather stay in a place where people don't yell. Elaine reached into her top drawer and pulled out a fresh key. It had a purple ribbon looped through the hole. Sadie took it with both hands. Downstairs, Chad was pacing. Kelsey was on speakerphone with her sister, trying to manufacture sympathy. No? It's like she totally blindsided us. I mean, yeah, she owns it technically, but who does that to their own kids? Pause. No, we didn't sign anything. She just said we could stay. I guess it was verbal. This is, like, elder trauma drama. She posted the same words 20 minutes later to her Instagram story in pale pink cursive. Elder trauma drama. Just because you're old doesn't mean you're right. Number toxic relatives, number pray form. Elaine screenshotted it before she even finished reading. That evening, Chad sat on the edge of the couch, flipping through his laptop furiously. She can't just do this. There's gotta be some loophole. We need a lawyer. Kelsey scrolled absently through Reddit threads on squatters' rights. They said if you've lived somewhere more than a year, you might have tenant rights. She said 10 business days. That's not even 2 weeks. They both looked up as the doorbell rang again. Mr. Langford stepped in without drama. A man who belonged more to boardrooms than living rooms. Evening, he said calmly. You can't just evict us, Chad began, standing fast. You're welcome to challenge it, Langford interrupted, setting his briefcase on the table. I encourage you to hire counsel. But I should warn you, you're in violation of property law, zoning ordinances, and local nuisance codes, all documented, all time-stamped. He paused, looking between them like they were overgrown students, and he a very tired professor. You may attempt to stall, but it won't end well. Elaine was setting the kettle on the stove when the email pinged in subject line all caps. Urgent cease and desist intent to evict. The attachment was a sloppy 4-page PDF drafted by a local firm Chad had probably found on Craigslist. The font was Comic Sans. The signature block had a missing closing bracket. She clicked forward, typed nothing in the body, and sent it to Mr. Langford. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Langford. Already countered. Amateur hour. Let them squirm. Elaine closed her laptop with quiet satisfaction and poured 2 mugs of chamomile. Sadie was in her sweet, no worse sweet reading on the window seat with a blanket over her legs and a pillow shaped like a turtle pressed against her stomach. Downstairs, voices rose again. $300 an hour? Chad shouted. She's bluffing. We just need time. Kelsey. We've had time. We've lived here rent-free since the pandemic, Chad. What do you think she's doing negotiating? Chad's voice dropped, muffled by the wall. She'll cave. She always does. Elaine took a sip of tea and turned the page of her book. The next morning, the doorbell rang twice in that impatient, neighborly way Marla had perfected. She bustled in without waiting for permission, holding a sheet cake so aggressively frosted it looked like a dare. What's this? Elaine asked. Marla smirked. Farewell game night. In looping red icing, the cake read, Thanks for playing. Player 2 eliminated. Elaine nearly laughed. Nearly? They set it on the counter beside the toaster oven and covered it with a glass dome. Within 5 minutes, Chad had emerged to grab a soda, paused mid-step, and stared at the cake like it had insulted his ancestors. He didn't say a word, just walked away with the fridge door still open behind him. That afternoon, Elaine came down the hallway and saw Kelsey at the mailbox, inside shoulder tucked against the wall, elbow crooked awkwardly. Kelsey didn't hear her approach. Elaine watched as she peeled labels from a stack of envelopes. Not hers. Elaine's return address is half torn, fingernails jabbing beneath adhesive like she'd done it before. Elaine took out her phone and captured it in a single silent photo. No flash, no warning. Kelsey looked up too late. Interesting hobby, Elaine said evenly. Kelsey straightened, eyes wide, then narrowed. I was sorting. You get confused sometimes. Elaine didn't break eye contact. I get even better. Later that evening, Sadie padded into Elaine's room with something tucked under her arm. She looked nervous. I found this, she said, holding out a weathered leather journal. It was in the old closet, behind the sewing box. Elaine took it slowly, her fingertips brushing the faded spine. Her initials were still etched in gold, barely legible. Sadie sat beside her as Elaine opened to the first page. The 6th of June. 1,980. 1. Our first walkthrough. Yellow siding, cracked patio tile, and a maple tree so stubborn it reminded me of myself. Sadie's eyes widened. You wrote all this? Elaine turned a few more pages. Mortgage documents tucked between entries, receipts for insulation upgrades, notes about repairs and neighbor birthdays. I didn't just live here, Elaine said softly. I built here. Sadie touched the page gently. They never asked how. Elaine smiled faintly. They never wanted to know. The locksmith arrived in an unmarked van just after 9 a.m. He was younger than Elaine, expected late 20s, maybe with a buzzed haircut and a soft Midwestern accent. Rekeying 3 entry doors and replacing 2 interior locks, correct? He asked, double-checking the order on his clipboard. Elaine nodded. Correct. And if possible, I'd like the new cores coded to a master key. He looked up, mildly impressed. You've done this before. I've done a lot before, she replied. He went to work. By 9:23, the front and back doors clicked with new resistance. At 9:41, the upstairs hallway door received a fresh deadbolt. At 10:07, the basement entry was rekeyed its door, now separating the future from the past. Meanwhile, in the hallway, movers in branded polo shirts wheeled in flat-packed boxes and folding bins. They were professional, discreet, and heavily tipped. Living room, downstairs rec area, guest bedroom, Elaine said. Only those rooms, the rest stays. They didn't ask questions. Each box bore a crisp white label with the words Chad and Kelsey. Move out typed in bold. A few even had handwritten notes from Elaine herself. Board games, unplayed but loud. Kelsey's blender collection, none returned. Chad's trophies, participation. The sarcasm wasn't for spite, it was for record-keeping. At noon, Sadie stood in the doorway of Elaine's suite holding a laundry basket full of her things. A battered novel, her blue headphones, a tiny cactus in a coffee mug labeled Introvert's Fuel. Is it still okay if I stay? She asked, voice small but steady. Elaine turned from arranging clean linens. It's yours now. Sadie crossed the threshold and set the basket down carefully. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sadie said, I don't know how you're doing all this without screaming. Elaine smiled faintly. Screaming is what they do when they lose. By late afternoon, the house began to react. Footsteps slammed up the stairs. Then bang, bang, bang in Elaine's bedroom door. You're a bitter old woman, Kelsey screamed from the hallway. Do you even hear yourself? You think you're strong, but you're just lonely and pathetic and clinging to rules because no one loves you. Elaine opened the door slowly, deliberately. I may be all of those things, she said, her voice ice and steel, but I'm still more gracious than you. Kelsey blinked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she stormed off, muttering obscenities that bounced off the now soundproofed hallway walls. An hour later, Marla arrived. She carried a fresh set of storage boxes tied with string, each with a post-it on top. This time, the handwriting was unmistakably gleeful. Game over. Player 1 eliminated. Player 2 respawning in Mom's basement. Loot crate. Unclaimed emotional maturity. Elaine stacked them beside the others like trophies made of cardboard. They still think you'll flinch, Marla said, wiping her hands on her scarf. Elaine gestured to the basement door. They're in denial. They'll run out of that too, Marla replied, heading for the kitchen. Eventually. The moving van arrived at 8:01 a.m. Engine humming, crew efficient. They wore neutral polos with crisp logos, and not one of them asked who was staying and who was going. Elaine stood on the porch in a gray cardigan, clipboard in hand. A to-do list was clipped beneath a moving manifest and a highlighted item log. Each room had its own tag. Nothing was up for discussion. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't smile. She simply pointed downstairs. Guest room, storage binson, they obeyed. Marla stood beside her, arms folded, sunglasses on. She watched the truck doors roll up like theater curtains. From the upstairs window, Kelsey watched too, frozen, pale. By 9:15, Chad was loading plastic bins into the Subaru like he couldn't quite believe it was real. A stack of board games tumbled sideways in the back seat settlers. Monsters, dice rolling around like marbles in a lunch tray. You can't just make this your victory lap, he muttered as he passed Elaine on the walkway. We were family. Elaine didn't even look at him. That was before the tape. It landed with the weight of final judgment. Chad's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. There was no comeback anymore. Neighbors lingered on their lawns, pretending to trim hedges. Walking dogs they'd already walked that morning. Phones out not filming, but close enough. Kelsey emerged last, red-eyed, makeup blurred, dragging a roller suitcase behind her. She paused at the end of the driveway, stared at the house like it had betrayed her personally. Then, in a sudden burst, she turned and threw her key down the walkway. It skittered across the concrete, stopping just shy of Elaine's feet. I hope you rot in that house, she hissed. Elaine bent to pick up the key, examined it, and slipped it into her cardigan pocket. You won't need this where you're going, she said. Kelsey's breath hitched. She opened her mouth to retort but spotted Marla watching from the porch, arms still folded. Instead, she looked away and got into the car. By noon, the movers were gone. The house was quieter than it had been in 2 years. The air itself felt wider. The echo in the halls had changed, pitchless, crowded, less chaotic. Elaine descended the stairs to the basement and flicked on the light. Empty. A sunken sofa imprint remained on the carpet. A pale rectangle on the wall marked where the whiteboard had been. The air smelled faintly of dust, lemon cleaner, and something old letting go. She stood in the middle of it for a long time, saying nothing. Then she stepped into the echo and clapped once. The sound rang clean. Upstairs, Sadie was taping newspaper to her bedroom trim. A plastic tray of paint rested on a towel beside her. Elaine knocked gently. Green, she asked, peeking in. Sadie nodded. Sage. She dipped the roller into the tray. I want it to feel like spring, even when it's not. Elaine stepped inside and watched her smooth the first swath of paint across the wall. You chose well, she said. Sadie smiled, then dipped the roller again. The eviction had not only succeeded it, had humiliated. On the community Facebook group, a new thread was already gaining traction. What happened at the Mercer house today? Did she really evict them? Good for her. That woman kept our block from turning into a frat house. Elaine scrolled without comment. but she screenshot every reply, just in case. The moving truck arrived without fanfare this time. No gawking neighbors, no drama. Just a small hybrid SUV trailing behind it, its back window covered in hand-drawn hearts and stick figures. A boy of maybe 7 climbed out first, holding a sketch pad to his chest. His mother followed, early 30s, close-cropped hair, calm face. She signed something to the boy with one hand while balancing keys in the other. Elaine watched from the porch, arms crossed lightly. She didn't wave. She waited. The woman approached, her smile subtle, genuine. "You must be Elaine," she said, voice careful. "I'm Jessa." Elaine nodded, stepping forward. "Welcome, it's ready." Jessa glanced around the porch, then to the house behind her. "I needed somewhere peaceful, somewhere safe." She hesitated, then added, "We both did." Elaine tilted her head, voice quiet but steady. "This house knows how to hold peace. It just needed to remember." Jessa nodded, and they shook hands, no extra words, no explanation needed. Inside, the guest room had changed. Elaine had spent the morning making quiet edits. The lace curtains had been swapped for soft linen ones. A low bookshelf now lined the west wall, filled with classics, poetry, and illustrated field guides. Beside it, a basket of folded throws and a small tray of tactile puzzles for the boy, placed intentionally at eye level. On the dresser, a square wooden frame holding a photo of the backyard in spring. Elaine and her husband sat on the porch swing, coffee mugs in hand, light pouring through the trees. It wasn't just a guest room anymore. It was an offering. That evening, Sadie curled up on the couch beside Elaine, both of them sipping hot cocoa while the new family unpacked boxes down the hall. "They seem good," Sadie said, tucking her legs under her. "They are." Sadie looked around. No voices shouted. No footsteps rattled the ceiling. Just soft music playing from a speaker in the corner, and the murmur of cardboard being folded. "It already feels like home," she said. Elaine reached over and squeezed her hand. "That's because it is." Later, alone in her study, Elaine opened her email and saw it. Subject, "Can we talk? Chad Mercer." She didn't open it, didn't pause, just dragged it to the trash. The digital sound of finality was quiet, satisfying. Curious, she opened her browser and pulled up Kelsey's Instagram. Blank. Every story archived, feed wiped. No captions, no hashtags, no curated sarcasm. Elaine stared at the white space where personality used to live. Sometimes silence wasn't strength, it was the sound of unraveling. As dusk fell, the new boy padded into the living room holding his sketchpad. He pointed to the wall near the bookshelf and looked up at Elaine. Jessa translated from the hallway. "He wants to know if it's okay to draw something there. Just in pencil." Elaine crossed to him, crouched down, and smiled. "Make it yours." The lawyer's office was smaller than Elaine remembered. Cozy now, instead of clinical. Maybe it was the light. Maybe it was her. Mr. Langford sat across from her, reading glasses low on his nose. The corners of his mouth turned in that faint, almost smile he reserved for real work. "The house will pass to Sadie under your revised will," he said, tapping the new page. "With 2 conditions, no co-signers and no subletting. That right?" Elaine nodded. "If she wants to share it, it should be a choiseneau, a rescue." Langford nodded and made the final notation. "Clear, tight, enforceable." He slid the pen across the desk. Elaine signed her name with the same careful loop she'd used on library cards for decades. No hesitation. At home, the binder was already half full. A weathered 3-ring with reinforced corners. It lay open on the dining table beside a stack of manila folders, loose Polaroids, and Sadie's colored pencils. Inside, a letter to Sadie on the first page typed, but signed by hand. A copy of the original mortgage. An annotated floor plan of the house. Clippings from the local paper about their block in the 80s. Notes on which wall outlets sparked and which faucets liked to whine. The second section was harder, titled Values plus Storylines. Elaine filled it with journal pages, some photocopied, some original. Stories about how she and her husband had chosen the paint color in the sunroom. The neighbor who used to play jazz on the porch. The spring Marla had planted daffodils in secret, only to pretend they'd been a gift from the bees. Each page was labeled and date-stamped, But not just for posterity for protection. This wasn't nostalgia. It was record-keeping. Marla arrived with her portable scanner slung over one shoulder and a thermos of chicory coffee. "I brought power strips and salted cashews," she said, setting them down like sacred offerings. "We're going to digitize like it's 1,999. Elaine rolled her eyes, but smiled. "Let's get to work." They scanned for hours, laughed softly, listened to old Glenn Miller's CDs, argued about whether to include a certain HOA warning letter from 2003. By dusk, the binder had gained 2 pounds and a new label pressed onto the spine in Marla's shaky but proud handwriting. The Mercer file. Not lost, not loud, just ours. Upstairs, Sadie had started her own section. Drawings of the house in all 4 seasons. A hand-scrawled page titled, "Rules for When I'm the Grown." Up. A letter folded carefully in 3, addressed to the person who opens this binder in 2060. Elaine found it open one morning, pages fluttering like small flags. She didn't ask. She just added a new page in her own section. One line, centered in clean, sharp ink. "They got the house. We got the home." Later that week, Elaine stood at the curb with a wrench in one hand and a brass mailbox plaque in the other. The old one had read Mercer nothing else, just a name. Now, she unscrewed it, dusted off the screws, and replaced it with a new one. Mercer rewritten. The final bolt clicked into place. Marla watched from the porch, arms folded against the cool air. "That's not a sign," she said. "That's a signature." Elaine smiled. "It's a beginning." The table stretched longer than it needed to. Leaf extensions locked in place like arms wide open. Elaine had pressed the linens the night before cream-colored, edged in a faded floral print, Sadie said. Felt like a page out of a grandma mystery novel. She meant it as a compliment. The dishes were mismatched but intentional. Elaine had chosen them that way. One from her wedding set, one from the thrift store, one painted by Sadie in 6th grade with the word Ben's in bold red letters across the center. It was a Thursday evening, calm and golden, and the house felt like it was breathing evenly for the first time in years. The basement, now converted, had undergone a soft transformation. Beanbags gone, fluorescents swapped for warm sconces, bookcases lined the walls, not alphabetized, but organized by whim. A small area rug anchored the center where a low coffee table sat, bearing a stack of poetry anthologies and a bowl of clementines. Elaine had left one of her husband's flannel shirts folded neatly over the arm of the reading chair. A silent kind of attendance. Guests arrived slowly, Mr. Carrington from next door, the Millers with a bottle of sparkling cider, the Gutierrez twins from across the cul-de-sac. Marla was last, of course, in a denim jacket layered over a wool poncho, her earrings mismatched and unapologetic. Sadie greeted each guest at the door, barefoot but composed, like she'd been rehearsing hospitality in her head all week. She carried a clipboard with seating notes and a pencil behind her ear, which no one pointed out but everyone noticed. Elaine stood at the kitchen pass-through, steady as a conductor. "Take coats, offer cider, ignore compliments," she whispered to herself. The room filled light conversation, laughter in polite bursts, forks clinking gently against ceramic. Nothing loud, nothing sharp. After the roast chicken and roasted carrots had been cleared, Sadie stood near the head of the table holding a folded piece of paper. The room quieted instinctively. Marla adjusted her scarf. "Mr. Carrington leaned in. "I wrote a poem," Sadie said. "It's short." She unfolded the paper, hands only barely shaking. "It used to echo in here, not just the house, but me. Then someone turned the volume down and let me be quietly free. This room was once the loudest place. Now it's where I exhale and think. So thank you for the quiet. And the paint that's not just pink. You made this my safe place." Silence for a second. Then Marla raised her glass. "To duct tape," she said. "The spark of justice." Everyone laughed. Elaine, especially. It bubbled up, not bitter, not restrained, just light and earned. Dessert was apple crisp with hand-whipped cream. Elaine had labeled each ramekin with guest names in black marker on washy tapatini signs of attentiveness, of permanence. No one asked where Chad or Kelsey were. No one needed to. The absence wasn't hollow, it was healed over, like a well-knitted scar no longer worth tracing. After the guests left, Elaine stood in the doorway, watching the taillights fade down the hill. Inside, Marla rinsed dishes without being asked. Sadie had disappeared to the basement reading room with her poem and a slice of extra dessert. Elaine turned off the porch light and stood in the dark for a moment longer, then whispered, "Good night." Not to anyone in particular, just to the noise that once lived here. Elaine sat in the community center conference room, under flickering fluorescents and beside a half-empty coffee urn, reviewing a draft titled "You Still Own Your Voice." The brochure was for a non-profit she'd quietly joined, Safe Ground Elders. It helped older homeowners navigate rights, inheritance traps, and verbal squatters disguised as family. "Simple font," she said to the volunteer across from her. "And keep the margins wide. White space makes truth feel breathable." The 20-something graphic designer blinked, then nodded. Elaine reached for her pen and circled the tagline again. "Aging doesn't mean giving up the keys." She adjusted it in red ink. "Aging doesn't mean giving up the lock." In the weeks that followed, Elaine ran 3 workshops. Sadie sat beside her at each, quietly checking in attendees and distributing resource packets with handwritten welcome notes. "If they try to silence you, they fear what you've remembered," she wrote in one. Sadie wore her "Quiet Women Don't Stay Quiet Forever" sweatshirt. No one corrected her posture, her language, or her right to be there. After one session, a woman in her 60s pulled Elaine aside in tears. "I thought letting my son move in meant we were reconnecting. Turns out, it meant I disappeared." Elaine handed her a flyer and touched her shoulder. "You're not invisible, you're just between chapters." The basement library got one final upgrade. A contractor installed soundproof paneling along the main wall, thick, textured, and meant to absorb even the most persistent chaos. Elaine chose the panels herself. No logos, no nonsense, just insulation and intention. When it was finished, she stood back, eyes narrowed. "I want something that says this isn't just mine," she told Marla. "It's a boundary and a bridge." Marla grinned. The next day, she arrived with drop cloths, a box of chalk outlines, and 3 jars of paint-warm ochre, stubborn indigo, and a green that looked like sage in rain. By the following weekend, the mural was complete. Abstract vines curled into words across the wall, sprawling upward with purpose. "Reclaim, rewrite, remain." Sadie stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind her back. "You made this look like memory, and Armor had a baby." Elaine chuckled. "That's exactly what I was going for." Meanwhile, word traveled. Chad had been spotted at the county office asking about transitional housing waitlists. Kelsey was working the cash register at a neon-lit arcade off I-25, yelling over beeping machines and preteens with unlimited tokens. They'd couch-surfed too long, burned through favors, ghosted by people who used to double-tap their filtered lives. One neighbor whispered, "I heard they're living in his old Corolla now." Another, "They should have been nicer to Elaine. That woman's got steel in her bones." Elaine didn't gloat. She simply carried on teaching, planting new perennials, maintaining a house that no longer punished her for existing in it. The postman started calling her Miss Mercer, the matriarch. Sadie beamed every time he did. The fall was complete, but it didn't look like vengeance, it looked like gravity. Chad and Kelsey were gone, displaced and ghost-like. Elaine, meanwhile, was a guest speaker at a senior advocacy breakfast. Her topic? The Duct tape was never about the door. She stood before the podium, calm and unflinching. When people decide your background, they stop imagining you have an exit, or a plan, or a key. But silence isn't surrender. It's the staging ground for reclamation. The invitations were handwritten, folded in half, and tucked into neighbor mailboxes with sprigs of rosemary tied by twine. Wisdom Circle. First Thursdays, 6-8 p.m. No phones, no interruptions, no background noise, just presence. Bring one story or one question, bring yourself. Elaine didn't advertise it online. She didn't create a Facebook event. That was the point. The first meeting drew 9 people. Retirees, a high school teacher, Marla, of course, with a box of loose-leaf tea and a mismatched mug that said, "I told you so," in cursive. One widower brought a carved chess set and nothing to say. One younger woman brought a photo of her mother's hands and wept quietly when she passed it around. They sat in a wide circle in the living room, the floor layered with rugs and floor cushions, no screens in sight. Elaine lit a few beeswax candles. No fragrance, just warmth. The fireplace crackled softly behind them. Sadie had helped set up earlier, arranging chairs and slicing oranges. Now she sat beside Elaine, legs folded underneath her, holding something square and stapled in her lap. When the circle reached her, she cleared her throat and held it up. "I made this," she said. "It's my first zine. It's called Quiet Women Don't Stay Quiet Forever." She passed out copy-hand-drawn covers, scanned photos, little essays in uneven font. One page read, "Sometimes silence is a survival instinct. Sometimes it's a strategy. But sometimes it's just waiting for the right person to say, 'You're not background.'" The room went still. Then someone clapped. Then everyone did. Elaine leaned in and whispered, "You're braver than I was at your age." Sadie smiled sideways. "I've had better teachers." Midway through the night, someone knocked softly at the back door. It was Mrs. Nguyen from 3 houses down, holding a Pyrex dish covered in foil. "I wasn't sure if I could come," she said, "but I made tamale casserole, and I've been missing this." Elaine opened the door wider. "Then you're right on time." Later, Marla raised her mug in the middle of a pause between stories. "To duct tape," she said, earning knowing laughter. "And louder endings." Elaine raised hers, too. "And louder beginnings." They toasted not with clinks, but with soft nods and deep breaths. The room was quiet, but not empty. Warmth radiated out from the center across the floor, across generations, across years that had taken and now gave something back. Sadie lay curled up on the couch after everyone had gone, thumbing through her zine again. Elaine folded the blankets, humming softly. "You know," Elaine said, "I used to dread game nights. The noise, the performance, the pretending." Sadie looked up. "And now?" Elaine turned off the last lamp, let the dim evening settle in, and sat beside her. "This is the sound I waited for." 15. The echo gone. The basement was still. Not the kind of silence that comes before chaos, but the kind that follows it, the sound of something finished. Elaine stepped inside barefoot, her soles brushing the edge of the rug Sadie had chosen. The air smelled of old paper, lavender oil, and something newly earned. No hums, no buzzing lights, just presence. She walked the perimeter slowly, trailing her hand along the edge of the soundproofed wall. The panels absorbed the warmth of her touch like they'd been waiting for it. The mural had faded slightly since its painting, but the words still climbed defiantly toward the ceiling. Reclaim, rewrite, remain. Shelves lined every wall, now fiction and history, poetry and pamphlets, picture books tucked next to vinyl LPs. On the lowest shelf, next to the donated Braille readers, sat a box labeled, "Loud Games, Retired with Honor, Do Not Disturb." Elaine smiled. No bitterness, just memory, like a cleaned wound. Behind her, light footsteps, then arms around her middle. Sadie's voice, muffled but certain. "I'm proud to be part of your story." Elaine didn't speak for a moment, just held, her hands over Sadie's, and leaned back into the hug. "Not part," she said eventually. "You're the sequel." Sadie squeezed tighter before releasing her and stepping back. Elaine moved to the far door, the one that used to lead to what Chad called the lair, a space once full of snacks and slurs and noise without consequence. Now it was sealed. Elaine peeled the backing off a small yellow sticky note and pressed it dead center to the door. She smoothed it with her palm and read it aloud with a softness that felt absolute. No re-entry for the past. She turned. Sadie grinned, then trotted upstairs to finish organizing the zine shelf in her room. Elaine lingered. In the silence, she picked up the black leather-bound journal from the table and opened to the last blank page. A mug of chamomile steamed beside it, already steeped, the tag hanging gently off the rim. She sat, pen poised, listening to the faint notes of piano drifting from the upstairs living room. Marla, by the sound of it probably playing that song again, the one she always called Almost Home. Elaine wrote one line. This house didn't just survive them. It outgrew them. She closed the journal with a soft thump, sipped her tea, and looked around the room that once tried to silence her. Now it listened. Now it lived. And above all, now it stayed hers. From upstairs, the piano paused, then started again. A different key, but the same hands, steady, certain. Elaine whispered, more to the echo than herself. They duct taped my door. She stood, pressed her hand once more to the wall, then turned off the light. And I opened the exit they never saw coming.